I'm Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group, and welcome to our webinar series, where we invite subject matter experts and thought leaders to help guide us through these unprecedented times. It's never a good time for any of us, but we rely on the guidance of others, and we hope you'll visit our website where these leaders are giving us that guidance that we all so desperately need. And today I am so delighted to be joined by our guest, Sharon Greenberger, who is President and CEO of the YMCA, one of the largest social services organizations in New York City, serving over 500,000 children, adults, and seniors through programs and services that empower youth, improve health, and strengthen our communities. Sharon will be sharing how the Y is doing during normal times and this pandemic. She is uniquely qualified to lead the Y, having spent over 20 years in both the public and the private sectors, working to improve New Yorkers' health, livelihood, and promoting development of New York City. Sharon, welcome to speak about what is going on in New York City's YMCA. And I say you're uniquely qualified because the Y touches so many different aspects of New York City, from real estate to the government to alliances. And your career has spanned all of that, because prior to being at the New York City Y, you were the SVP of Facilities and Real Estate in New York Presbyterian Medical Center, overseeing $2 billion of active projects. And I knew you there. And then before that, you were Chief Operating Officer of the New York City Department of Education for over 1,700 public schools. And there were 100 new schools that you helped develop and build for 1 million children. And you also were the Chief of Staff to the Deputy Mayor, Dan Doctoroff. So you were in the government, and you were also the VP of Economic Development for the Alliance of Downtown New York. So clearly great government experience. And with all of that experience, you also had the training, having a master's degree in housing and community development with a focus on environmental design from MIT. So that experience and that, training, but as CEO of an organization, one of the largest in New York City, I'm sure your leadership skills have truly been tested.
Yes. I think we've all been tested, right? I think this has been a test of optimism. It's a test of fortitude. It's a test of living with uncertainty and control. And that's what that people really want right now. And you're right. It has certainly been a test for me. I would say it's interesting. I was sharing with my staff, we started this year in transformation mode. We were doing so many things. We're set to open 2 new Bronx branches later this year. We'd rolled out a new membership model. We were just really flying high in this transformative mode. We very quickly moved to survival mode, and now we find ourselves in startup mode. And it requires, I think, a different mindset, a different framework, a different skill set. And for me, you're right, it's been a real calibration of how I lead. I think it's tested me in a couple of ways. My father used to have this saying that great leaders make decisions based on incomplete information, and the speed of change has required that we think very nimbly, very quickly, and with incomplete information. So that's been a sort of watchword for me over the last several months. I think you have to be super transparent given the uncertainty about what you know and what you don't know. We've had to do that with our staff, with our board, with our members. I don't think there's such a thing as being overly communicative right now. So we are just using all of our platforms to make sure that we're talking with everybody. And you have to be super flexible. And to your point, I think the experiences that I had, especially at the Department of Education, where there are 1 million students, 140,000 employees, 2,000 schools, there's something that goes wrong every day. And so I sat in that chair and I made judgment calls every day. And so I think for me, I learned to trust my intuition and to trust my judgment. And that's part of what's happening now. And at New York Presbyterian, it was such a large institution with 13 million square feet of space. I had to delegate and I had to trust that delegation. And so when I think about the skills that I'm using now and how I'm leading, those things certainly are coming into play.
And I want to say to our audience too that Sharon will be taking questions throughout, and I'm sure that many of you out there running not-for-profits and other organizations will want to pose some questions to Sharon. So we'll take them as we go along. But Sharon, you know, having sat on the board of the New York City Y and now the national Y, you know, the Y is one of those organizations that we provide so many services. It's almost hard to say everything that we do, from, you know, after school services to healthcare, to immigration services to those coming to this country. How has COVID-19 impacted the services that were providing before to now what you're doing?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And you're exactly right. Like it's very hard to describe succinctly everything we do because we do so many things. And at the root of what we do is bringing people together in community. We very quickly pivoted to understanding that we were going to have to provide both relief services and virtual services and really do as much as we can virtually, and even some on the old-fashioned telephone. So I'll share a couple slides. We've been able to continue to serve our communities. Certainly through our online mentoring and educational programs. We have a number of after-school teachers who are providing content. Our New Americans work, which serves 10,000 people every year, is continuing. We have wait lists for English classes. We have wait lists for other citizenship classes. So that work continues. Let's see if I can do this. So other fun things that we're doing in terms of virtual learning and making sure that we're using sort of the fun and play of the Y and bringing that back into some of these environments. On the relief services piece, we did two very important things. So we have 8 residential branches that serve homeless New Yorkers. And we very early on recognized that hospitals who had homeless patients who were non-COVID patients needed to free up bed space. So we worked with New York Health and Hospitals to move patients into our branches to free up really necessary bed spaces. So we now have 1,000 people in our branches that we're serving and providing food for across the city. So that's one of the important relief efforts we did. We also did some initial childcare for healthcare workers. We're going to start that work up again next week. And I know many Ys throughout the country are involved in that work as well. We launched YMCA at Home, and this was that pivot, right? Which is, how do we take everything that we do and make it accessible to as many people as possible? So we created YMCA at Home, which is this fantastic resource that includes all kinds of health and wellness resources, family resources, and we launched a daily Facebook Live class, which I've been trying to take. It's been great for me because it's helped me rediscover muscle groups that I didn't even know I had. And we've had, I think, over 250,000 people participating in these programs, which has been just terrific. You'll see some of the offerings that are here. And for me, I will say, one of the really important things about participating in these is seeing the community still come together, right? And seeing those connections still very, very, very present for people. And that's part of the joy of them coming together. It is not the same, we know that, but those connections are really important because that's what, at our heart, what we are about is providing a sense of connection and a sense of achievement. And if we can continue to do that, we'll continue to do that. And then just quickly, some other services that we're doing, which I don't think I have slides here for, but we're certainly continuing our outreach to seniors. You know, we know that there are many, many seniors living throughout the city who are living alone, and so making sure that somebody's in touch with them. And we wanted to make sure that we stayed in touch with our seniors in high school, many of whom were making college decisions. And for many of those students, especially in our scholars program, the grown-ups that we have in our programs are the ones that they trust to help make those decisions. So we helped about 150 kids make decisions with them and their families about what college might look like going forward. So a huge amount of work that is still ongoing and still very important, and still, again, really working to keep people connected.
So, yeah, you know, we had Lily Ovaleta with Culture Intel on, who's a member of the National Y, and you know well, talk about the psychological impact of isolation, separation, and of course for seniors and the youth as well. This is an important piece of keeping them connected, and the Y has tried to do that, obviously, with your virtual programs here. And you've seen the impact, is that right, with your members?
Yes, we have seen the impact. So we can, and I think impact is a really important word for us. And I think we have really worked hard to demonstrate impact, whether it is around, some of our health goals we had and making sure students succeed and everything else. But we know the number of people who are coming and participating in these classes. We know the downloads that are happening. We know the questions that we get. People are very anxious to return, as you can imagine, but there's still resources available.
So what is the plan in terms of reopening? Is there a plan? How will you keep members safe, your staff safe?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We've been planning on it and thinking about it for a long time. We're really hopeful. And I'll just go to this slide and I'll just talk about this for a moment. So as you know, New York City is in its reopening phases right now. The YMCA is included right now, we hope, fingers crossed, in phase 4. There's some talk about not staying in phase 4, but we are going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that we can, which would mean that we can begin the reopening of our branches on July 20th. At the Y, we pilot and test and then scale. So we're going to start with 2 pilot branches, and we're going to test the protocols that we have developed over the last several months. We are working very closely to follow all government guidance and mandates and protocols. So that includes everything around PPE, personal protection equipment. We'll make sure that people are wearing masks, and that includes staff and members. We'll do temperature scans when people come in. We'll have hand sanitizer everywhere you can look. We'll practice social distancing. We have already mapped out where equipment will be. And we'll phase in activities. We want to start, again, making sure that the protocols work. So we'll start with equipment and cardio. We'll move up to group exercise, and then we'll open pools, all sequentially. And in the same way, we'll test 2 pilots for a week, and then we'll open up more branches and then more branches. So I think we're appropriately cautious. We also know that people are super anxious to get back inside. People are calling and knocking on our doors all the time. The other thing that we'll do is make sure that we do an appropriate reboarding of all of our staff, because the protocols will be different. The expectations will be different. We'll be cleaning much more, and everybody will have to be participating in that. And so that's a piece of what we'll be doing as well. Now, we are really fortunate to be part of a larger movement, and there are dozens of Y associations who have been through a reopening phase in the last couple of weeks, and we're learning from them, and we're sharing best practices. So it is nice to know that we're not in this alone.
And you have 24 branches, is that right?
Yeah, we have 24 branches, and because the slides are here, I'll just show you. So we have 24 branches in 5 boroughs, and we have an upstate camp. And these are the 2 branches that I mentioned that will open. They were supposed to open at the end of 2020 in what I was calling deep fall. But I think now it'll be, somebody said shallow spring of 2021. One in the Northeast Bronx. It's a standalone Y, absolutely beautiful on what had been really untouched land. It will be a magnificent, magnificent building that's under construction now. And then the last one is in the South Bronx as part of the La Centrale mixed-use development project that includes about 1,000 units of affordable housing. 24 right now. Will expand sometime in 2021.
So I remember when Mike Bloomberg was the mayor, and I was on the New York City Y board. You were not the CEO at the time, and he said, when there's a Y in a community, there's less crime and the community is stronger, and people really feel like, there is a sense of belonging. And I remember when I joined the Y board at that time, I joined it because I visited one of the Ys, and one of the youth there was, after school, and I thought, why does he come here and be with his other teens? And he was a big burly football player type, and I thought, why is he here? And he said, had he not been there, he would have been on the streets and drugs, and he could be dead, he said. I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to join the Y. And it was a Y being built in the Rockaways, and now you're building another one in the Bronx, but funding for these Ys is hard.
Yeah.
And And I remember you've done your campaigns. So that brings me to my next question. How have you been able to fund these Ys and get a great board together for your association board and your branch
Yeah.
boards and keep it going? And now, particularly during these times.
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's a really interesting moment in time, because we have a very interesting revenue model, right? A very diversified revenue model that depends on membership dues and program fees, government support, and philanthropy. And what we're seeing right at this moment in time is there are risks with each of those components, right? So we closed our doors March 15th, and we have not collected membership dues or program fees what will be 4 months. So there's
You suspended fees and membership.
We suspended all membership fees. And so we are, we will have lost tens of millions of dollars in revenue that we cannot recover. Right. And so that's put a real burden on us at the moment. It's one of the reasons that we're really anxious to reopen. And we do rely on government support, especially for some of our programs like after school and some of our early education programs and some of our teen civic engagement programs. But philanthropy and fundraising is important, and partnerships are important. So we have a board that has been really terrific, especially in the last several months, in thinking about how to help us at this moment in time. And so they themselves, I will say one thing about them, they really stepped up. When this started and we knew we had to close our doors and we stopped collecting dues and we knew that we were going to be losing dollars every month, we knew that the most important thing for our staff was to provide medical benefits for those on our plan. And the board stepped up and raised money within 2 weeks. We had 100% board participation to make sure that we could keep our staff covered through June. So they themselves provided dollars to provide 1 month of coverage, which was just a huge statement, I think, to the staff as well, in support of them. But we are very fortunate to have a board that understands the importance of supporting the Y, not just financially, but with skills and with connections. And so I think one of the great things about really great nonprofit boards is that you understand what skill sets you need. So we've recruited Chief Risk Officer from a bank who now chairs our Audit and Compliance Committee, and he's been extraordinarily helpful right now in thinking through some of these protocols. We have a CIO from another major financial organization, which has helped us think through some cybersecurity and our Salesforce integration work. We have marketing expertise that really helps us think through opportunities that we ourselves would not, because that's not our core expertise. We have I now have a board member who runs a hospital in Brooklyn, who's been instrumental in helping us think through some of these protocols. And so it's, I think, very important to understand what your needs are in terms of what you do and the services you provide and the skill sets that you need that will really enhance your work. I will say this about our board too, it's become an extraordinarily close board because many had Y stories and many felt very passionately about the Y, but some didn't, and some came through various connections. And you, Janice, I know, recruited several folks who have turned out to be stars on the board because they came in, they realized how much it meant to them. They realized they were surrounded by people who felt equally committed, and they have this tremendous bond. I would say right now our board, there are real friendships there. There are people who have supported each other professionally and personally, and that's, I think, very good for us. It inures to our benefit because I think it just increases the level of passion for the work that we do.
Well, I think that I've always told people when you join any board, corporate or not-for-profit, join because you feel a passion for the, it's like I said, when I heard what that story was of this young man, I just joined the board because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to help save these young men and women from the sea.
And it's tangible. It's really tangible.
Yeah. So there's a question. What did you learn about your leadership skills that you did not know before, Sharon? The audience. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good question. So one of the things I kind of have to keep myself in check on sometimes is that I have a lot of ideas. Like I wake up in the middle of the night and I have 10 ideas. I read something and I have an idea, and I am just constantly pushing out ideas because I think you know, that's how change happens. That's how innovation happens. But sometimes I don't always calibrate my ideas, or I don't calibrate the urgency of some of my ideas. And so I do think I have learned I have to be very deliberate about what I share, because also sometimes I think when you're a leader, if you put out an idea, sometimes it's taken as something that has to be done as opposed to a suggestion. And so I've had to sort of calibrate, you know, sort of keeping them all together, and then maybe once a week saying, so here are my thoughts of the week, and you know, what do you think, and let's talk through some of them. So that has certainly been something that I have learned. And the other thing, and this is a tough one right now, when we went into remote work, I think it was my CFO who said, working remotely just means you're working 24/7. And I think that's true. I think at least, I mean, it's maybe, I'm not even sure that our foot has come off the gas just because things are changing all the time, but the amount of work and the intensity of the work and the urgency of the work required us to be on all the time. And I got into the mode of emailing all the time and responding all the time. And it took me longer than it probably should have to recognize that can be oppressive, right? People don't need to hear from me at 9 o'clock at night. They don't need to hear from me at 6 a.m. Like, I can deliver things within a reasonable time frame, nothing unless it was urgent. And so that's been a good lesson for me to learn as well.
Hold the idea till the next morning. I know.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the public-private partnership, the importance of locally delivering services to a community, but not just working alone, the need for collaboration.
Yeah.
You know, some companies have said they want to put money into communities locally, but you can't just do it alone. You need to do it. How does that work, Sharon?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. We could not do our work without really strong public-private partnerships and without strong public-to-public partnerships. We serve communities and we do a lot of things, but we don't do everything. And it's really important for us to understand what's happening in local communities. And so each of our branches has an executive director, and part of his or her responsibility is to make sure they are developing partnerships and relationships with other service providers who have a great pulse on what the community needs are as well. And so that might include libraries and schools. We do an enormous amount of work in schools, so principals are really important to us. And I think we're in the business of preventive health, and we do a lot, but we benefit from relationships with health systems and insurers to better understand what are the needs, what are the opportunities for collaboration and support. It might be programmatic support, it might be financial support. And we've had some really great successes with our corporate partners, especially with our youth around, it might be internships, it might be mentorships, it might be making sure that kids learn financial literacy through some of our banking partnerships. We had a terrific partnership with Capital One that resulted in their programmers going into one of our middle schools and teaching kids how to code. And I will say, as great as it was for our kids, it was equally great for these programmers, right? To sort of once a week spend 2 hours with a group of kids and really impart knowledge and really see the joy that they could provide. And it was skill sets, skill development. And those kinds of partnerships are invaluable to what we do. We really could not have the reach that we do. We could not have the impact that we do if we didn't have great public, private, and government and nonprofit partners across the city.
So talk to us a little bit about that success with the youth that you've had and otherwise across the country have had with your scholars program and success rate of kids in high school, and then they go into college. You've had the gala dinners that I've attended every year where you see the scholarships being awarded and they go on to college. And that's a lot of what companies are talking about too, how we get kids, before, not dropouts, but continue them in high school and into college and then into internships and what corporations are doing there and what your success has been.
Yeah, so I would say on this, I would focus on 2 elements to our success. One is access, right? Making sure that kids have access to programs, to mentors, to opportunities. We take some of our kids through our Rose Scholars, that's the name of our scholars program, to look at colleges. many of them have never been outside of the city. So for them to be on a college campus and to picture themselves there is an opportunity that's extraordinary. So there's an access piece, and then I think it comes back to that demonstrating the impact. And I have felt very strongly that we can't just talk about outputs. We can't just talk about the 500,000 kids who, 500,000 New Yorkers who come to our doors, or serving 1 in 5. It has to be so to what end and what happens. And this is where I think our youth programming, and it's true in New York and it's true throughout the country, has extraordinary impact, whether it's through our Rose Scholars program, where we know if a kid comes into our program, they're going to graduate from high school, and they're most likely going to college. Like our graduation rate is something like 94%. Our college acceptance rate is 90%. And if you look at what that compares to on the city level, it's 20 points higher. But we know that. We can demonstrate that come in a freshman, this is what's going to happen by the time you're a senior. So that's one really important piece. I think we are really focused on citizenship and civic engagement and making sure that kids see themselves as leaders. And so some of the programs that we do, whether it's what we call our Teens Take the City program, our youth in government programs, even I think some of our youth employment opportunities where kids step into leadership, are enormously helpful and enormously impactful. And so we are beginning to correlate, for example, what happens if you're a summer intern here and you start college, is your persistence rate higher? So we want to really make sure that we're putting kids on a path to longer term success. And it's not, as you said, it's not just us, it's wise throughout the country. You mentioned 500,000 people coming through our doors, half of them are youth, right? And so we have a real responsibility to making sure that we're leading them and helping them find success.
Yeah, so when Teens Take the Cities, one of the mayors said, again, it was Bloomberg, said, they make us look bad because they're so good.
They're amazing. They're extraordinary. I mean, they do that. So, and in this program, kids draft bills, and the program culminates in them going to City Hall, and it's terrific because they often meet with city council members, sometimes their own city council members, and they talk through the legislative process, and they see it in action, and they elect a mayor, and they put forward bills, and they debate them, and it gives them a real taste of being empowered.
So I want to close a little bit on a letter that you wrote June 1. A lot of social unrest going on in this country, and tell us what you said in that letter.
Yeah, I thought it was really important for me to say something about where we are. And I really believe we're in this sort of state of reckoning. I know I personally and organizationally and as a country sort of looking and saying, well, what is our responsibility to ending systemic racism? And how do we really move forward on equity and social justice? And I thought it was important for me to speak directly to that, in part because I think the Y is so rooted in the work of equity and access. We believe inherently in reducing barriers to success. It's everything that we do. And we play a role there, and there's always room for improvement. I also think, and it goes to what we were just talking about, at our core, we help people find and use their voices, especially youth. And our youth programs are around empowering voices for social good. And we have, again, a very significant role to play there. And third, we're very much focused on civic engagement. The Y's 3 core tenets are on youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. And I think part of social responsibility is civic engagement and making sure you're standing up and fighting for what you believe in and moving us towards a more equitable society. And so I think it was important for me to say that. I think it's important for us as an organization to be engaged in that work. And again, I would say to recognize where we have done really good work and where there's room for improvement, as there always is.
Again, another webinar we did was with Edelman, and it's about a PR firm, and you're marketing your brand, and it's your brand. Most U.S. citizens and the globe around the world really want you to take a stand and say what you believe in. And buyers of products and services are belief buyers, right?
They
They
are.
believe in the promise of that brand. So whatever it is you stand for, stand up for the brand, right? And if you believe in social justice, you have to stand up and say it as you believe, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what you did. And so I thought, but you have
It's
to be
about
thoughtful
values,
about it.
right? It's
You have
about
to be-
demonstrating your values
Your
and
values, right?
yeah.
You have to be thoughtful, and you did that. So, congratulations. I think that's very commendable, and it's the right thing to do as for the Y brand. So, any parting words for those who are running not-for-profits, going through COVID-19? We're not through it yet.
No, and I think I was just, yeah, it's really hard. As I was saying to my staff today, like we're in this moment of both daily crisis and long-term crisis. And so that requires, again, I think sort of a calibration of energy and patience and fortitude, and really just staying strong. And especially if you're in New York, we are a resilient place. And we are a very dynamic city that has lived through a lot of things. I've lived through a lot of things here. And this is a challenging one because it's not an acute crisis. It is a long-term crisis, but you have to remain optimistic. You have to remain strong, especially if you're in a leadership position. It's sometimes lonely, but you're there for a reason, and you were selected to sit in that chair for a reason. So you got to have faith in yourself.
Well, I think leaders have to call other leaders, just as we're doing now in webinars, leaders providing advice to other leaders to stay strong, stay resilient, provide, hopeful, realistic hopefulness, but be realistic, be transparent, and be there for your people as you are for yours. So Sharon Greenberger, running a major not-for-profit with serving over 500,000 adults, youth, and seniors and children. Thank you for all you're doing. You're a fabulous leader and true friend and wonderful colleague. So thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you. You've been my greatest mentor and advocate. So to you.
You'll be back, I know, to give us some more guidance. Thank you, Sharon.
Anytime. Okay. Take care.
Stay well. Stay safe.